Okay, here we are. A little bit of technical stuff going on in the morning, but I want to thank you first of all, everyone, for showing up this morning during this very powerful time in our history. And, you know, at Warrior Sage here, we care very deeply about the state of the world because as we realize the state of the world within is the state of the world without. How we are within is affecting everything that we do without. And I really had a strong calling to call our dear friend, Starla Lewis, who's been a lifelong educator. She's been educating people in many realms. She's going to introduce herself and tell you a little bit more. But all I can say is that Starla is a living example of someone who walks the talk of unity in action. She's learned through trials and tribulations. She's had a very interesting, very powerful, challenging life, certain parts of her life. And she's always turned it around and made it an act of love. So today we have a very special guest and our friend here, Starla Lewis. Let's give her a hand, everyone. And let's give an honoring to our elder. Thank you so much.
Can I interrupt for 2 seconds?
Welcome, Starla. Let's.
Sir, can we mute everyone, please?
Everybody has to mute that isn't speaking. Zoom can't handle that kind of distortion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So everyone, just please mute yourself. And then what we'll do is, yeah, everyone please mute yourself since I don't have proper access right now. And then everyone else, if you'd be kind enough to, yeah, there we go. Okay, perfect. I'm going to mute where I can. Okay, very good. Okay, so let us introduce Starla. Now, Starla, I think maybe we might have to unmute you just on this one. Just go ahead and say something, Starla. We'll test it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good.
Zach, do you want to make a little introduction?
Oh, I mean, Starla, just pure love embodied. And this is what we need right now in the world more than ever. And just being in your presence, Starla, is just this emanation of just beauty in the form of love. And it's so palatable. So today is really soul food from Starla. And we are just so happy to bring Starla to you. We've had the opportunity of meeting you and just being fed by your wisdom. And so it is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity for us to start off our life with you here today.
Thank you so much. It's a thrill to be here because we're talking about, you know, evolving the world as we evolve ourselves. And so I'm really excited about that. And a little bit about me. I was born December 20th, 1949 in a colored hospital in Springfield, Missouri. I was born to teenage parents, Rose Carolyn England Lewis and Alan Lee Lewis. I was born one day after Rose's 18th birthday, so I like to think of myself as a belated birthday gift. And I had the blessing and privilege of being around a lot of elders. And my best friend was born in 1880 on a plantation in Missouri. Her name was Katie Elizabeth White Boyd. She lived 100 years, and we hung out like that. And so I feel like a lot of the wisdom that I was able to receive came to me at a very young age. And I really feel like my mission and my purpose started when I was about 4 years old, but I didn't truly understand it until I was about 18. And so that's a little bit about my background.
Thank you, Starla. And tell us a little about your education, you know, what, I mean, you know, who you've been educating and who's been serving all these years?
Well, when I was 18, I took my first Black Studies class at the community college. And the light bulb went on in my head because it was like I had never heard this information before. And I thought this is the information that I had needed as a child in order to understand why I wasn't inferior. I didn't believe I was inferior because my family, of course, told me wonderful things about myself, but I lived in a society that gave me a lot of mixed messages. And it was in that class that I started understanding that what I was learning was something that my teachers needed, because teachers can't teach you they don't know. It was something that my friends needed because they kept telling me I wasn't like other Black people. And I had desegregated 2 schools, and I thought, well, I'm the only Black people you know, so who are you comparing me with? And then I realized that coming from the era of the civil rights movement, of the Black Power movement, of the anti-war movement, of the protest against sexism and feminist movements, I realized that this was information that my nation needed so that it would not self-destruct. When we know ourselves and when we know each other, we can see ourselves in each other, and we can also treat each other better, and we can treat ourselves better. So that's basically the background. I started teaching when I was 24. I was teaching Black Studies at a place in San Diego called San Marcos, Palomar College. And I walked into my first Black Studies class, and there were no Black people. So I thought, okay, this is going to be an experience. Turned out to be an amazing experience, because what it taught me is, I think, what the world is learning right now, and that we as human beings really do care about each other. We just want to know each other. We have been taught a lot of myths, lies, and stereotypes about each other. And so how do we begin to see ourselves and embrace? Well, I think we do that through knowledge and information. So that's how I became an educator, because I had never planned to be a teacher, didn't even really like school. But I realized that if we can teach ourselves and our youth to be truth seekers, then education becomes a delight, because it empowers us.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Starla, regarding where we are right now, anyone new coming on, if you'd be kind enough just to make sure you mute your background. Thank you. Starla, so take it away. We're all in your raptured ears, all right? So whatever you wish to share with us today regarding our where we are in the world right now.
Well, and we're in a really good place. I don't know if we all see that, but humanity has stepped up all over the world to protest injustice. And I believe that none of us want injustice. And I don't believe that we're programmed for it. I believe that we come here, these amazing spirits, these amazing souls, and then the world happens to us. And we get a lot of misinformation about ourselves, a lot of misinformation about each other. One of the biggest challenges, I think, on the planet is self-love. Do we love ourselves? And I think self-love becomes a challenge for us, not when we're born, but as we move through the world and experience life. We get a lot of misinformation about ourselves. We often get a lot of poor treatment that makes us feel that something's wrong with us, or why is this happening to me? We have life experiences that we haven't learned how to learn from and then transcend and transform. So I think that part of our biggest challenge is really saying, this is a time for love to take over the planet, to take over our hearts and our minds and our spirits, and manifest in our behavior. You know, even living as long as I live and have seen as many protests as I've seen, this is the first global protest where I really feel that we as humanity are getting it, like we're really getting it. And I think it happened because of a very heinous event, and that was, we watched someone die. Literally, we watched for 8 minutes and 40 some odd seconds someone's breath leave their body. I don't think that's a typical experience for most people. You know, our soldiers go to war, they see that. Our police officers see that. But I think the average public, we don't see that. And I think it moved us in a way that we had never been moved before. As a mother, as a woman and a mother, to hear a man cry out for his mother, who has already made her transition to spirit, that touched you in a way that you could not ignore. And I believe that's why so many people have marched and protested for justice, But I think it's very dangerous to think this is about the police, because it isn't. And if we only focus on the police, then we won't understand the bigger picture. We won't understand what we're evolving into. And that is a deeper meaning and understanding of who we are and how we're connected and what the world needs, which we all know is love. To see nations moved, which help bring to our consciousness the global consciousness that we're not just separate, isolated countries, you know, our cities or our islands or any combination. That we are a world, and we need a global consciousness, because I used to say all the time that America was this amazing experiment where people from all over the world have come to reside. And if we can learn how to love together and live together and work together and be together, then we would be a model for the whole planet, because everybody's here. So I'm really thinking that that's another opportunity that we're seeing happen right now before our very eyes, the whole world coming together in love to protest injustice. Well, I believe love is the most powerful force in the universe. So it's going to help us transcend the injustice and transform the injustice. I also believe that it's multi-generational. So I see a generation gap actually closing before our eyes. Children are there, grandparents are there, and all ages in between. The beauty in that is the life that I lived. I always hung out with old people, and I always hung out with children, and the wisdom from both ends, from when we come here and when we're about to leave here, is phenomenal. We don't take advantage of that. And we don't give children a voice. Well, we saw children raising their voices and marching and really showing that they're more aware than we give them credit. And so I believe that one of the other things that we need is truth. We need to be truth seekers. We need to know that the truth evolves in the same way we evolve, so it will change and grow and expand, you know, but that's what we're supposed to be about, changing and growing and expanding. And so I think that that's another reason it's a really powerful time. I get a lot of questions from parents about how do you help children understand what's going on in the world, you know, but we forget that they're seeing it. And so we have to come up with some truths to share with them to help them understand it better. It's the same way as looking at our families. There are truths that our children are witnessing in the families that we never talk about. We don't talk about death. We barely talk about divorce. We don't talk about family violence or our family addictions or any combination thereof. And so I think this major act is forcing us all to come to terms with, we have to deal with life. We have to deal with our stuff. And we have to deal with it multi-generationally, because that's how you stop it from being transferred to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, you know. And so that's part of it as well. One of the things that I was hoping coming here today is that I would be able to take questions from the participants, because I believe that I'm here to serve you. I don't know everything, but what I do know, I am more than happy and willing to share with you. I just want to say this.
Starla,
Uh-huh.
I have a question, a burning question.
Okay.
What do we tell the children? What is the truth of what we tell the children now of what's going on? How do we talk about racism to the children? And I'm talking, when I say children, our children are all of the children.
Absolutely.
So how do we speak to all the children as one and tell them the truth about this?
Well, the first is we had to acknowledge the truth for ourselves. You know, we had a African-American president, and people started talking about post-racism and all this stuff, when in reality, we think that we don't have a definition of racism that we're talking about globally or just within the United States of America. I think we have to come on the same page in terms of, well, what is racism? Well, racism is a reality that comes from a mythology. Well, what is that mythology? The mythology is that there's that you can divide the human family into categories based on physical characteristics, and then put all these beliefs about these people from the myths, lies, and stereotypes that we have been perpetuating. So how do you begin with the truth? You start teaching children racism it exists. And then you tell them what it is. It's a belief in race. So that's your first myth. So that helps them understand it isn't real. And then it's the belief that one race is superior to all the other races and therefore has the right to rule. And therefore has the right to rule is what helps us understand it as racism, because all over the world, people have ethnic issues. You know, my ethnic group is better than your ethnic group. And that gets mixed in with racism, but it's not race. You know, it's cultural competition. But the reality is, once I understand that racism is a belief, well, we change our beliefs all the time. So once I understand that it's a belief, then I can begin to change my beliefs through truth seeking, through knowledge, through information. And then that starts to break down stereotypes. You know, because we think we know people based on stereotypes. So these people eat this and these people do that. I like to give the example that often when I'm in mixed companies, they'll say, we'll do a potluck. And they'll say, Starla, could you bring the fried chicken? And I'm like a vegetarian, you know, so I'm like, I don't touch dead flesh like that, you know. And then people go, oh, okay. Or they'll say, oh, I've never known an African-American vegetarian, you know, but there's lots of us out there, you know, so it's raising those kind of consciousness. And I think also the truth isn't always comfortable. You know, it's hard to say to your children when they're getting ready to go out into the world. I was 5 when I was desegregating a school in Missouri, and my Aunt Kate set me down and she said, baby, when you go to school, there's going to be some white folks who hate you simply because of the color of your skin. And they are not going to want to see you do well. But you are not to hate them, because hate only destroys the hater. She said some of them will do it out of meanness, but most of them will do it out of ignorance, because they don't know who you are. That's the armor I put on at 5, and I've been wearing it all my life. I don't take other people's opinions of me personal, because they don't know who I am. And when we learn that on that level, we can transform that to any situation that we're in. And because of that, I was also open to those people who were open to me and friendly to me. I didn't feel that I had to protect myself from every white person I saw. I had to pay attention. Are you open to me? Some are, some aren't. So when I desegregated my second school and I was the only African-American in the school, a little white girl said to me, hi, my name is Sharon. You want to play with us? And I got excited because there were literally nobody else. And I was like, yeah. And her friend goes, what did you ask her for? And I thought, I'm asked, I'm coming, you know? And so we have to understand that we have to place ourselves in what might be a potentially uncomfortable situation, you know, and we also have to know we don't always have to wait for an invitation. We have the right to be anywhere we want to be on the planet, in the world, or in any situation. And so often I get asked questions like, what does it feel like to be the only Black person in the room? And I'm like, what? You know, it doesn't feel like anything. Because why? Because I know I have a right to be there. Even if I get pushback, if there are people who don't want me there, that's okay. You deal with that, you know, because I know who I am and I know that I have the right to be. And I think that's part of it. So I think teaching your children first of who they are and that they have a right to be wherever they want to be. And if they find it too uncomfortable, they have a right to leave. You don't have to stay places that you feel uncomfortable until you learn how to feel comfortable there. I think it's also important to help them understand that it isn't about people who hate you. You know, one of the things I've been fortunate to come to understand is that the way we teach racism, it's people hate you. And so if somebody doesn't hate you, they don't even know they're racist, because it's like, well, I don't hate these people. But the reality is it isn't about hate. It's about supremacy. Do you think I'm better? Do you think you're better than me? Do you think that I can't be your equal? Do you think that I don't deserve to be or have what you have? Those are some of the unconscious ways that people act out white supremacy and or racism. Well, if I know that you could have those thoughts and yet you still have a kind heart, you still have good intention, even though your intention may not be best for me, but you're not trying to overtly hurt me, then I can still build a relationship with you. We can come together on those points of commonality, if you will, you know, and I will probably call you out on it maybe once or twice, but then I will just accept that's where your mindset is based on your how you've been taught in the world. I don't believe that most of us are racist because of our parents. Some children have very, very overtly racist parents, but most children have basically nice human beings who want the best for them. So they may say things that sound racist or look racist, but that's not their intention. An example I could give is I had a student once, a young white girl was in my class, and she was saying that when the O.J. Simpson trial took place, her mother said, "See, that's why I tell you stay away from those black boys." Well, her intention isn't to dislike black people. Her intention is to keep her daughter safe. So her beliefs block her freedom from being and knowing all kinds of people. Does that make sense? Or I had a white student in my class who, I have a class that I teach where we go out into the black community, and her mother made her drop the class because she said it's too dangerous for you. But all the other students of all different ethnicities that experienced that realized there are so many stereotypes that they overcame simply by spending time in the black community and listening to intelligent people talk about all kinds of things. So I say we have to teach them through what we say to them, but also allowing them experiences that will help them grow and understand on a deeper level as well. And to understand that racism isn't about a color. It's not about what color people are. It's about a thought form. What do people believe and what do people think? So I always say that some of my my closest white supremacists are black people, are Mexican people, because they too believe that white is superior, it's better. And they don't want to live around people who look like them. They want to live around white people because that's coming up in your status and in your world. And it's not. And that's different from my parents who found a house in a white neighborhood, and the house was amazing and the price was beyond amazing. And they bought the house because the people thought my dad was Italian. And then my mother and I showed up and they went, "Oh my God, they're Negroes," you know, but they gave us an opportunity to be there because civil rights and all that was happening. So they said, well, things are changing. Let's give these Negroes a chance. Well, the reality is they didn't change their attitude toward black people, but they created a shift in their own resistance to at least, let's see what happens, you know? And sometimes that's part of our challenge is how do we change that shift in our reality? In teaching for 45 years, I have met all kinds of people, all kinds of students, all kinds of classes of people. And the beauty that I've experienced in that is watching people in a very short time, given accurate information, shift their thinking. And I had a young Mexican man who said, before I took this class, me and my friends would go out and we would beat up black boys for sport. And after I started taking this class, I said, we have to stop that because they're our brothers and they experience a lot of what we experience. And then I had a young black boy say, well, Ms. Lewis, before I took your class, I hated Mexicans. And then I realized I didn't even know a Mexican. And so it's like we get these thoughts and feelings moving through society. I believe one of the major changes in people is when they have the opportunity to learn about people and spend time with them. Spending time is not enough, because in spending time, we still take all those stereotypes and stuff with us. And then we'll say things to people, you know, you're not like other people like you, when in reality you are, but because they have a misconception of what other people like you are, they can't see the humanity in the other people. And so I think that's very much a part of what we teach children, and teaching them how to make a space for themselves. You know, I was the only Black girl in my brownie troop, which were all young white girls. And I remember my grandmother didn't really want to let me join because she had fear that I would be the brunt of their jokes and the brunt of their, you know, hostility, etc. And it didn't happen, you know, but it could have. And then years later, not that many, I was 9, I joined Girl Scouts. And the leader quit. She said, I refuse to be the leader of a troop with a nigga in it. Well, my friends were like, thanks for joining, because we didn't like her anyway. So you just take it as it comes. You don't hold on to it. You don't, you know, make yourself feel bad about who you are and the skin you're in. And you teach children how to do that same thing. And sometimes, you know, hurtful things will happen, but you teach them how not to hold on to them. How do you let go of pain? You know, how do you allow yourself to heal from it?
Thank you, Starla. Thank you.
Well, oh, and one more thing. And you surround children with images first of themselves, and then you bring in other cultural images for children. I think when children play and manipulate things, for example, my daughters came to me when they were young and they said, Mom, how come we can't find books with little girls who look like us? So I went on the search, and now I'm a collector of Black children's books and multicultural children's books. But then I also started making them paper dolls and coloring and dolls to color. And I made them multi-ethnic. You know, I started making them, first ones were all Black, and then I said, okay, let's bring in some island people and some European people. And they were so demanding that I had to, you know, copy them. Back then it was Xeroxing. And then all of a sudden, one of them said to me, Mommy, you should make a book. So I did. So I have a book called Sun Kisses, multicultural images of little girls from all over the world. And it's in English, Spanish, and French, and it all has love messages on each page, you know. So we can be creative as well. Our children need images of themselves. And then they also need to be able to see themselves in other people and other cultures.
I love that. I love that. And one of the reasons that I love that, along with what you were saying there, is that you speak about myths and beliefs and stereotypes, that you teach your children that there are myths and beliefs and stereotypes. And this goes across the board. Mm-hmm. And so for speaking of children, and all children are our children, having more books and more information like the Sun Kisses across the board, so that we can start to learn about each other. You know, when you speak of your grandmother having fear that when you're going to go to the school with the brownie group with all the white children, and her fear about what might happen to you and nothing did, then that too is a stereotype, you know? And so, and then the white children, maybe there's a parent that thinks that, well, I don't want my child to join an all Black group because maybe the Black children, this is what's going on with them. But if we have more books and more information and more people that look different, that speak in a way that can be felt and understood from the place of love, like where you're coming from, Starla, where we're coming from, where those of us who are online here, I'm sure are coming from this place of love. If we can speak this language that we all know in our heartbeat, then I feel like we're getting closer and closer to shifting.
Absolutely. And we have to demand from our educators that they educate themselves.
Yeah.
And that is to learn about the children that they're going to be interacting with, and even the ones that they're not, so that they can teach the children about one another. And I'm just going to put a plug in for a woman named Jane Elliott. If you Google Jane Elliott, her work in terms of the children is amazing, and it's transformational. I think, you know, as a child, I'm glad that I was integrated into schools. Some of it was very painful. I mean, the teachers were often unkind because they'd come from a history, and that hasn't changed for our children today. When you listen to the children, they will tell you things like, one of my Latina students was saying her teacher called her Maria, and her name was Marisol. And she goes, well, I can't say Marisol. Like, I can't say your name. She said, so I'm going to call you Maria because you're all Maria anyway. Well, that was very hurtful to that child. I don't even think the teacher was conscious that was hurtful. You see, so she didn't set out to hurt the child. And I think our unconscious miseducation makes all of us say things that are, you know, out of pocket, so to speak, or not accurate and correct. And I always give this example. I was teaching at Palomar College. It was during the Ayatollah Khomeini situation where everybody was anti-Iranian, and I had an Iranian student, and I asked him if he would do a presentation on Islam for my class. And he said, oh, Miss Lewis, I'd be glad to. You know, he did this amazing presentation. And then after, and he brought brochures and all kind of stuff. And I was telling him, I said, oh, that was just brilliant. And he says, well, I want to thank you because I learned so much. And I just kind of looked at him and I said, oh, well, good. He says, but I think you should know I'm Jewish. You know, and then that has to be okay. It has to be okay to be able to make mistakes, and then just own that. You don't. I didn't try to say, oh, I thought, you know. I just said, I had no idea that they're Iranian Jews. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, and thank you for allowing yourself to grow, because often we think, well, you know, they should have known that I wasn't, you know, but that's part of the stereotypes. Another thing that's out there that's really challenging is we don't know the language of racism. You know, racism has a language, and we've all learned it. We've all learned it. There's a article called "The English Language is My Enemy," and it talks about all the ways that the English language uses the word black in a negative way. Black belt, black law, black market, you know, just all these ways. And they're very unconscious. And so most of us have had, or even said to someone, well, it was just a little white lie, or it was a big black lie. You see what I'm saying? Something that simple, we don't understand we're perpetuating that belief consciously and unconsciously. Or when our kids watch cartoons and the villains are always in some kind of darkness, you know, and black outfit, black hat, whatever, and then the heroes or heroines are all in something white and light and, you know, transformational that way. Unconscious learning is part of it. We use terms like biracial. Well, if we believe that we're all part of the same human family and there's one race, then how can we be biracial when one ethnicity marries another ethnicity? We are multi-ethnic, we're multicultural people, but we're not biracial people. And that term makes people start to separate themselves, first from themselves, because they don't see themselves whole anymore. And then they separate themselves from other kinds of people. And I was looking at a document someone just shared with me this week, and it said it was a pie chart, and it said they had X amount of percentages of Black people and X amount of percentages of Latino people, et cetera, et cetera. And then it said they had X amount of percentage of biracial people. But that's no information. And so it's like, how do we begin to help people as human beings feel one as humanity, and at the same time be able to celebrate their ethnic diversity and be okay with that too. You know, to be able to say, you know, well, I'm just going to give you guys an example because there's this amazing movie that is so fun called Lovebirds. And it's about an African-American woman married to an Indian man. It is a wonderful movie. How often do we see those kinds of mixtures? Even our media makes us believe there's only a mixture is only black and white. You understand?
Here.
Yes, yes. I love it. I love it. You know, and so I think that's part of it, you know. My grandfather, who I've never met, was a white man. And my dad grew up very, he grew up trying to feel whole.
Yes.
Are we good? I can't hear you.
I've muted them. Go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay. So we grew up, my dad grew up struggling to fit in because he lived in a time where he couldn't be a white man. And at the same time, the black kids were really, you know, calling him white boy and beating him up and all that kind of stuff. That comes from us not being able to just say, I'm whole. I'm whole. And I have part European and I have part African, and all that together makes me whole. You know, he never got a chance to live that in his life because he's, of course, older than me. So in his day, you had to pick a side. And in picking that side, society treated you a certain way. He got a lot of privileges because of the way he looked, but they weren't anything that he knew that he felt he earned. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I'll hire you. I'll promote you. I'll let you be the sergeant instead of just the foot soldier. But he knew it was because of his complexion. You see what I'm saying? And I think even that creates a problem for us in terms of self-acceptance and self-love. So are there any other questions, or did I answer?
Yeah, I'm gonna open it up. If anyone has any questions, I'd love if you can put it in the chat box, or you can put it in the chat box. Starla, I have a question, you know, for you, please.
Uh-huh.
Right now, it's disturbing to me what I see, especially around, you know, we've had this horrible, you know, occurrence happen to George Floyd, and then it's triggering, and it's only highlighting what's been there. And now, you know, this is all proliferating, of course, and it should be, the understanding and knowing what's going on. But now I see this sort of battle online between all lives matter and Black Lives Matter. And there's this, well, of course, all lives matter, but don't you get the Black Lives Matter right now? And then, so there's this interesting tension that I've seen in groups and friends and stuff. Some with an altruistic, yeah, all lives matter. Some with an altruistic in their heart. Can you respond to this and share about your experience of this, please?
I'm trying to, I recently heard someone give this example. They said, if your house is on fire in a neighborhood and they call the fire department and they come out to put the fire out, and everybody's standing there saying, well, all houses matter. You wouldn't ask them to not put the fire out. In other words, of course, all lives matter. And the question is, which ones are being taken historically and daily? You know, people talk about George Floyd, and I want to honor, you know, that he is a catalyst for our consciousness. But after he was killed, 2 days later, 2 other young Black men were killed. 2 days before, a young man was killed by civilians as he was jogging in the park trying to exercise, and a white man and his son in a pickup truck tracked him down and shot him to death. A mother cries out, my son was shot 40 some odd times by the police and he didn't have a weapon. You see, and so yes, all lives matter, but we're in a crisis in our country that we've been in for centuries. A Black man was killed every 2.5 days, lynched every 2.5 days for 51 years in America. We don't even teach that in school. And so the people don't have a consciousness that these lives aren't mattering. You know, we look at how we try Black children and brown children as adults and give them adult sentences for crimes that juveniles make because they are not mature and have not learned how to deal with conflict resolution. You see what I'm saying? But most people don't know that. We have a prison system that is an extension of a slave system, but most people think slavery was abolished because they don't read the 13th Amendment that says slavery is abolished in these here United States, except in the case of persons convicted of a crime. And we have in our country a prison industrial complex, which is filled with mostly Black and brown men who are worked for corporations. And we don't understand that that's a slave master mentality. You see, and that it's legal, that it's constitutional. And so it's what we don't know that's hurting us. It's what we don't know that makes us make the statements that we make. That's why I believe in truth in education. If we just told the truth. People were so upset at Colin Kaepernick, and the man who fired him apologizes. He said, if I didn't understand what he was doing, he wasn't anti-America, he wasn't anti-soldiers, he was anti the killing of young Black men. And that's why he took the knee. And as a little girl in Missouri, learning the Pledge of Allegiance and putting my little hand over my little heart and saying with liberty and justice for all, and I'm living in legal segregation, even at that age, I understood something doesn't feel right here. You see, what it didn't feel right for me to say with liberty and justice for all, and I couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't go to the skating rink. I couldn't go to the amusement park. And then as things begin to change, I could go on Mondays. I could go 1 month out the year to the skating rink on a Monday and the movies on a Monday. And when I got to the movies, I could only sit in the balcony with liberty and justice for all. You see what I'm saying? And so when you see Black people protesting certain things, it isn't that we're anti-American, it's that we're conscious of America hasn't lived up to what it says it wants to be, but we want to help. We want to help us get there as a nation. Does that make sense? But we can't get there if we won't acknowledge the blocks are things that are in the way. Of course, all lives matter. But if you watch police interactions, you can see a young white boy with a weapon and he doesn't get shot to death. He gets taken down. He makes it to the courtroom. And then you see a young Black male with no weapon and he's shot multiple times. People don't look at that. You see, they don't understand that. And I think that's part of some of the truths that we have to speak on and come to terms with. You know, as a white mother, my friends don't fear of their sons being stopped by the police. As a Black grandmother of a son, my fear is that he won't even get a chance to get out the car. You understand? Yeah. And when my grandson, who shares his stories, he doesn't tell them all because they're so many, but he was coming out of a gathering and something had happened, not at the gathering, but in that vicinity. And he was with his friends and they were just walking to their car and the police rolled up on them. And he said, he put up his hands and he said, "Officer, we're the good guys. Please don't shoot us. I don't want to die today." That's his first reaction to being stopped by the police. You see, why? Because they've seen or know people who have been shot and killed by the police. And so we have to raise just our consciousness to say, these things are happening for a reason, rather than saying, well, all lives matter. Say, why do they say Black Lives Matter. And when they're saying Black Lives Matter, this is going to be challenging for a lot of people, but they're also saying, and Brown Lives Matter, because our Latino young men are being killed at an incredible rate, incarcerated at an incredible rate. You see, our children get expelled from school. So it starts even before they get big enough to be stopped by the police. They get expelled from school. And now our schools are treating our youthful behaviors as crimes. So let's say you get mad at your friend, y'all get in a fight. They don't call the principal, they call the police. And those police come on campus and take these kids away, and so we have to look at all those connected dots, if you will.
Thank you. We got a whole bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to ask you to go through these a little quick. We have one from Viv, who says, it seems to me that women are less racist towards each other than men are. Do you see a link between racism and misogyny?
I think that racism, sexism are parallel concepts. And I don't see women as less racist than men. In fact, you will probably find more relationships between white men and women of color than you will white women and men of color because of sexism. Sexism gives women the status of the men that they're with. We get a lot of status from our men. And so in my consciousness, if I want to raise my status, I'm gonna select a white man because in our society, he has the highest status of everybody. Does that make sense? And if I'm a white woman and I'm conscious, I know that my status is gonna go down. I have friends that are NFL football players that I went to school with, and their white wives would say to me that people would come up to them and say things like, why are you with that? Her status now is she's not even with a human being. People would say things like, whatever he can do for you, I can do more. And she said, and this is all unsolicited, and these are different women. So I'm saying that racism isn't something that's just male or female, and sexism says to men in a very conscious and unconscious way, women are your property. Well, when you look at history, some of the issues between Black women and white women are historical, and they come from slavery. When white men who are married to white women would go and say to their wives, I'm not gonna be in for a while, I'm gonna go check on my crops. Well, she wasn't stupid, because the crop showed up inside of a Black woman's womb and was walking around the plantation with her husband. Are you following me? So there's these historical freedoms that white men have always had that white women didn't have, and often if a white woman ends up, even today, choosing to be with a Black man, her family will disown her. If she has a child by that man and then their relationship doesn't work, she almost always has to find another Black man because the certain white men won't date her. I mean, we don't understand. It's so convoluted, is the point I'm trying to make. And it manifests. One of our family members, who's a white woman, does the family reunion every year because we're the only family she has. And we're the family that embraced her and accepted her. Right. But now she's married to a white man, and he comes. So it's not the color, it's the thought forms. And that's very important. And also, I just want to end with this because I probably make them shorter. Most school teachers in elementary school are white women. And what we have seen is these white women send Black boys and brown boys to the principal more. And we come to understand that, especially when they're like, I'm going to say 9, 10, 11, 12, and they start really growing, there becomes this fear of this big boy. And some of my white colleagues would actually call me if there was a conflict in their classroom. This is our college level, and say, you know, these guys keep coming in late. Could you talk to them? And I'm not their teacher, and I don't even know them. And I'm like, well, why don't you want to talk to them? Well, you know, they're very aggressive, or and they hadn't aggressed yet, but there was this fear of this big black boy. These women didn't even know they really had. Do you understand? It's unconscious. We've all been taught to be afraid of black men. All of us, black men have been taught to be afraid of black men. And so we have to unpack some of those unconscious fears. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, well, that brings it directly to this next powerful question. And that's someone's asked, would like to ask, how to process and transcend my own subtle form of prejudice and racism.
You know, that's why I believe in education, because that's when it'll come out. Because you'll be studying something and you'll think, oh, I think that, or I was taught that, or I believe that, or I act like that. When I'm teaching, sometimes I get pushback. And I remember this one young white girl in my class who said to me, you know, I'm sitting in your racism and sexism class and I'm getting very angry. And I'm thinking, why don't I just drop this class? Because I would get very angry. And she said, and then it wasn't until we got to sexism and I saw some of the men getting angry that I realized, oh, wait a minute. It's not what she's saying, it's what it's bringing up for me. And she said, and what it brought for her was, she said, I have these amazing parents. And I thought, well, you know, my parents taught me to love everybody. She says, but then as I'm teaching the class and I'm hearing these different things, I realized, well, they taught me that and that's racist. And they taught me that and that's racist. Well, she said the same thing happened for the men. Men were like, well, I like women. Well, you can like me and still think you're superior to me. That's happened somewhere in our cultures before, you know, that men like us, love us, protect us even, but still think, you know, I'm the man and you're just. When we put that just in front of there, that's where we start to hear the inequalities.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another one. I would like to understand further if we should be talking, sharing, and using the word black as part of the movement to equality. I ask because I wish to acknowledge and witness and uplift those whom have been oppressed for too long and living under horrible circumstances while others thrive. But I do not wish to further the division agenda of separation of black and white.
Okay, so this is a really good question, because one of the questions I get is, well, what do you want to be called? We live in the world, and in the world that we live in, and especially the country that we live in, everything is being defined as white or non-white. That's our language. That's our studying sociology. White or non-white. We don't understand that non-white is also a code word for black. And what I mean by that is people call themselves brown, red, yellow, all those beautiful colors. But the reality is all the black people, meaning all of the colored people, all of the non-white people experience basically the same treatment. You know, and the challenge for them is, or for us is, that we try to be superior to one another because nobody believes they can be equal to white. And it's not a conscious belief. And I'm going to give you a quick example. 300 students at San Diego State University were working on diversity and race issues. They all separate and have their ethnicities, how they perceive themselves, black, white, Asian, Samoan, whatever it is. We give them a blank piece of paper. They're all in separate rooms, and they create a triangle of hierarchy. Who's at the top, who's at the bottom, and they put their ethnicities in this triangle. And the only thing that was consistent with all these different groups of people, including white people, was that white was always at the top. And when we understand that, there's the definition of black in the dictionary, and feel free to look it up, Any dark-skinned race, especially Negro. Any dark-skinned race. So the people who call themselves brown are perceived and treated as black. The people who call themselves Islander are perceived as black. One of my Samoan students said he was stopped by the police, and the police said to him, "Nigga, get up against the wall." He said, "I'm Samoan." He said to me, "Nigga, get up against the wall." So even though he had differentiation for who he is, the response of the institutional representatives did not have that same differentiation. We just need to understand that Black is not a people or a color anyway. It is a consciousness based on how people are treated in their nation and in the world. When you look at other cultures, India is a good example. The darkest Indians get the worst treatment. And you can go throughout the world and start finding that. And where did that come from? Most of it, for most countries, it came from colonization, but I don't think it came from colonization everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just ask people what they want to be called, because I think that's very important. People self-identify.
Very good. We've got a question from Alicia. I am Black and Indigenous, so I'm active in both communities and notice that the two communities approach activism differently. I notice that Indigenous activism has a very strong emphasis on healing intergenerational trauma, decolonization, and reconciliation, whereas Black activism, there is less discussion around that. What are some ways we need to address these issues and heal ourselves as a community?
I love that question. You know, all this that has happened, I've talked to Black people. We don't talk about it. It's too painful. When you come from an indigenous culture, you have deeper cultural roots. You have more conscious cultural roots so that you can create an activism around your culture. When you come from African-American culture, our culture was deprived us. And so those of us who know it are those who went out to seek it. So many of my brothers and sisters don't call themselves African anything. I'm not an African. Their history and their consciousness starts with slavery. Well, if you start a people's culture at their lowest point, then they have so much further to go. Does that make sense? But if you start with a consciousness of your highest point, you just have to pull yourself back up to where you were. Does that make sense? So to be culturally aware is essential to healing because it lets you know where you came from. And then you have the option of choosing the best from your culture. And then what doesn't work, you can let that go. In other words, we don't have to become our ancestors, but we can take the best from them. And then we can evolve through our interactions with one another to take the best from other cultures as well. Because at the end of the day, we all need to be multicultural. You know, that's how we're gonna find our connections with one another. You know, so it's about truly understanding that we don't have to all be the same and we don't have to lose our culture to become part of the whole. And our programming has been assimilate. And assimilation means get rid of your stuff and let's all just do the same stuff. That's not gonna work for us. We'll give up some of ourselves with that.
Thank you.
This is awesome. Those of you who've just come on, if you have any questions, please put them in our chat box here and I'll present them to Starla. Here's another one. I've been having this conversation with my parents, especially over why Black people don't just follow orders, quote unquote. And I can't seem to get them to understand that no matter what Black people do, there's a highly likely chance that they will be shot. And that it's an innate fear for your lives. I don't know what else I can say for them.
Well, you know, it's like law and order. When the laws are hurting you, they're supposed to be changed. And when we looked at, for example, the killing of George Floyd, he did follow the orders. He was in the car, he was out the car, he was on his stomach, he was handcuffed. I don't, you see, and so it's almost like damned if you do and damned if you don't. But what I hear from young Black men is, because one of the questions always is, why do they run from the police? Well, you saw why they ran from the police. They run from the police because they don't want to end up face down on the ground, handcuffed with a knee on their neck. See, there's no difference between the knee and the noose. And because most people don't understand the history, lynching didn't take place by just random community people. There were sheriffs there. There were judges there. There were ministers there who came to witness the lynching. They used to advertise lynching, you see. And the piece, I don't know if everybody knows this, but George and the police officer knew each other. They worked together. So this wasn't even just a man killing a man he did not know, you know, and so it goes deeper and deeper. So I say that I've heard friends say, if I'm ever stopped, they're probably going to shoot me in the back because I will be running. That's a terrible fear for a man or a woman to have. And for women, it's more about being raped than being shot. I hope that helped.
Who else? If anyone else has a share or a question, please put it in the chat box and I'll make sure that we pose it.
All right, I've got a loaded question, a really loaded one. What do you say to people like Candace Owens?
Like who?
Right. Okay. So there is a woman by the name of Candace Owens, a woman of color, who is speaking out and saying that there is no racism. And she has
or no systemic racism.
No systemic racism. And she has groups of other people of color who are behind her and also saying that they don't see this. They don't see.
Not groups. There's a small group.
There's a small group, but she's all over. And I'm actually glad, Starla, that you don't know who she is. And
maybe she does.
But you said
I don't know her personally, but I know lots of her.
Right. Right. Okay. So what do you say to people like this who are stepping out and this misinformation, and how do you handle that? How do you handle when you hear this from people of color?
Mm-hmm. Well, since I've been teaching all these years, I've heard it in my classroom many times. I've never experienced racism. I've heard from women. I've never experienced sexism. I say, you don't have a TV? In other words, if we don't understand it, it's not the individual person that doesn't like me that is a problem for me. It's the fact that racism has been institutionalized in all of our institutions. You know, when I was a little Black girl sitting in a church full of Black people and I looked up at Jesus, he was always blonde. How'd that happen before he was born? Are you following me? When I was a little Black girl and I would go to school and I read about Dick and Jane and the dog and the cat and Sally and the bird, none of them looked like me, and my grandmother was never there. You see what I'm saying? In other words, we don't call that racism. When I saw Happy Days on television, it was all about the 50s and there were no Black people in it. I was born in the 50s and I was around in the 50s. Where was I? And so what I say to people like that is this. They have a real deep-seated need to believe that they can make it just on their laurels. And if they do the hard work and follow the path and follow the rules and follow the authority and get the education, you know, get PhDs, because a lot of these people have PhDs. So they're not uneducated, they're just miseducated. Then they will fit into society, you know, and therefore, you know, I have white friends and people like me and, you know, I don't experience what I hear all these people complaining about. But the reality is, even if that would be true for them, there's all these other Black people and you're ignoring their experiences, you're ignoring their realities. You know, we don't learn American history. We don't learn it. That's why everybody's so shocked that this could take place. That's why I said it's about teaching the truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Women believed we were included in that until we started seeing how the laws that didn't give us the right to vote. So even that passage has flaws in it because we don't look at, I hear what you're saying, now I got to see what you're doing. I'm from Missouri, call me the show me state. I don't care what you're saying. I want to know how is that manifesting in your behavior? Institutionalized racism is taught. Racism, I believe, the biggest perpetuator of racism in America is school, and then media, and then religion. And I think when you look at all those things and you hear and see ways in which it's perpetuated, you see how we become unconscious of it because we just accept that's just the way it is. You know, I really, you know, it's amazing to me. And look, I'm Black, but I'm educated in those same schools. So I'm going to take on a lot of those same beliefs. You know, I've had Black teachers say to me, oh, I'm so glad they transferred me to a white school because these kids really want to learn. Well, yeah, they want to learn because they're learning about themselves, they think. Do you understand? Scientists, we can rattle off the names of so many white people who have contributed to the world. That's not a bad thing to know, but we don't know the Indians that contribute to the world. Who are Americans who contribute to America? We don't know the history of all those patents that slaves did that their masters got credit for. We don't know those, you see. And so it's the covert and undercover racism that people don't recognize, you know, and they take it for granted. And the reason we don't understand white privilege is because you don't have to think about it or do anything to get it. You see what I'm saying? In the same way that we don't think about male privilege. I always like to parallel racism and sexism because men don't say to themselves, well, my daughter doesn't want to take a night class because she's afraid she'll be raped. Are you following me? So many women don't take night classes. And it's a male privilege to be able to do that without having to think about it. And then those who do think about it, okay, I'm going to carry my keys a certain way in case someone tries to attack me on my way to the car. You see, and it's the same thing with white privilege. I don't have to think about the fact that when I send my child to school, there will be systems in place that will support and nurture my child. My granddaughter said school is hazardous to children's health, mental health. And one of her examples is the school that she went to has an anxiety room for the children because school makes them so anxious. The pressure that we're putting kids on. And then my granddaughter says, I spend hours and hours of my life on random information. Why? Because we're teaching them facts and statistics and all these things, but we're not showing them how to connect the dots. What does math mean to me? Well, I am math. What does science mean to me? Well, I am science. What does art mean to me? I am art. I'm dance and poetry and all those things. And yet I learn about it, but I don't understand that I'm of it. And I think that's part of our challenge. And I think that's that woman's issue. She just wants to belong. And when you want to belong, you follow all the rules, even when they're against you. You absorb the information, you regurgitate it back, even when it's hurting you, because your need is just to be accepted. And we all have that need on some level.
Thank you so much. Just want to highlight what you said, which is so powerful. I mean, I wrote this down. I hope everyone did. And it was white privilege, not understanding white privilege is because you don't have to do anything to get it. That is just so profound. I mean, finally that went off for me. I understand when you say it from that place, because if you don't have to be conscious about the privilege that you have, then it's not in your space. It's just there. It's you take it for granted. But if you have to do something to actually be able to exist, to be able to be a human being in the world, then this is going to be in your face. And so education is such a big part of awakening ourselves, like what's happening here with you, Starla, giving us this, awakening us to things that some of us, even, you know, I as a woman of color, that just went off actually for me. And so education, you keep speaking about education, and I feel it to be true in the fiber of my being. Many people have had the question of, where do I start?
Mhm.
Where do I start with education? If this has not been in my, if issues like this have not been in my face, where do I begin? What would you say?
Well, you know, one of the things that has happened since George's murder is that the books about racism are flying off the shelves. I mean, there are back orders because people realize that they don't know. And this is so important. There's an African proverb that I've always used with my students, and it says, not to know is bad, but not to wish to know is worse. And the reality is, at this point, the people who won't know are the ones who won't go out to seek the knowledge and information. And it's often because they don't want to know. And sometimes people don't want to know because they don't want to go through the pain of knowing. Knowing can be painful, you know. Whenever you're seeking a truth and that truth contradicts something that you believe at your core, that's uncomfortable. Or whenever you're seeking a truth and that truth reveals injustice that is horrendous, that's painful. You know, we put up a lynching exhibit at Mesa College, and it wasn't easy for people to pass the hall and watch. Sometimes you see people pass the hall, go in the bathroom and weep just because they glimpsed it, not because they studied it, you see. And so whenever you're studying something that's painful, a lot of people avoid it. Child abuse, we don't really talk about it. It's happening as we speak, but we don't talk about it. You know, people have been confined to their homes. Well, if you have a nice home, it's not so bad. You know, I'll go get it in the pool, you know, I'll do whatever I do in my space. But we don't understand that there were children who were sent to places that we wouldn't want children to be in, and it's called homes. Does that make sense? We look at all these challenges around COVID-19, but we don't talk about the incest around COVID-19, the child molestation and abuse around, the domestic violence around, the drug use around. You know, we're talking about a virus that we might get, but these other things are actually happening. It's painful to talk about painful things. And discrimination and all those things, it's not a comfort zone. I have been Black for 70 years, and I still find that most Black people don't want to talk about their pain. How do you heal what you don't talk about? Where do you tuck it? Where do you bury it? Where do you keep it? You know, and I find that when we're given an opportunity, a safe space to do that, most people will talk about it. You know, I think that's our challenge to say. And then, you know, sometimes when we talk about some of this stuff, people feel like, well, you're blaming me or you're blaming me. Racism isn't about white people. It's about the thought forms that people have been taught, and especially people in America. You will not be born in the United States of America without being taught racism, consciously or unconsciously, overt or covert, institutionally or individually. We've all been taught it. And most of us have manifested in some form or another. It could be something as simple as a preference for having a light-skinned partner. You know, I grew up being sought after and knowing that part of the reason I was sought after was because I had light skin. And these were Black men, you see. And So we have to look at our, and it manifests in white culture as well, but we never call it out. If I was not born blonde and I turned 14 and my rites of passage into middle school or high school is to go blonde, why? Well, often it's because, well, my mother did it. Or often it's because society says blondes have more fun. Or often it says, the society says blondes are more beautiful or more feminine or more desirable or more whatever. Why is it that we always want to change what we are? Because we've been programmed that there will be privileges and opportunities that will come with that change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's another question that's come in. Do you feel that defunding the police is a useful objective, abolishing police reform? What's your thoughts, feelings on that?
I think one thing we need to look at the history of the police. The history is that we didn't really have police as we understand them until we emancipated slaves. And so it's important to understand that they were created to basically police the freed people. And when you look at the law, there's lots of documentaries around this. They're not easy to watch. I'm gonna come with that truth. But there's documentaries around this that show how the police system was put into place, how the chain gangs were put into place, how the farming out of workers was put into place, all through this police system that we created. Part of the police were to go and find runaway slaves. I mean, it's literally, you can just go down. So I'm not saying that they should be defunded. I'm saying that if we choose to have police, like many nations do, that they need to be educated in a way not to protect our property, but to protect our persons. And to really be about the job of keeping people safe. And in my community, it doesn't feel like that. We're over-policed in my community. I have white friends who will come to visit me and go, my God, there's so many police. Well, if there's that many police and they're doing their job, there should be no crime. And so that's part of our challenge. Our police officers, many of them have the heart to want to make communities better, but they don't have the education to do that. And by that, I don't mean degrees. I mean, the language that the police use in my community are, we're going into the jungle. We're going into the war zone. Well, that comes with a mentality. So that's a very different mentality than we're going to serve this community of human beings. And I can see myself in them. I personally have witnessed police officers stop a young, drunk white boy in front of my house, pulled him out the car. What are you doing in this neighborhood? They were asking him. I actually opened my window so I could listen, because that's how I learned stuff. Where is your driver's license? He was drunk. He didn't have a driver's license, and they did not even arrest him. They told him to get in his car and to get out of the neighborhood. And that's it. Well, I'm not saying that's typical. I'm saying that happens. And so we have to begin to help the police, help them see themselves in the people that they're supposed to be protecting. One of the reasons we had the riot in Los Angeles when, what's his name? I'm blocking on his name. Rodney King was beaten and videotaped, is that they moved the trial from where this all took place to a community of police officers. So most of the people on the jury were connected to the police officers, not necessarily those, but police officers. And so when they found them not guilty and the city went up in flames, people didn't understand that. Do you see what I'm saying? So if I'm a police officer and I've been taught of a brotherhood, and we cover for each other and watch each other's back, I feel for those police officers who are going to be on trial for murder who stood by and watched, especially the one who said, shouldn't we at least turn him on his side? Who had the courage to just say that. But where was the courage to stop it? You see. In other words, you're a police and you're a police. You should be on the same level. One young man had only been a police officer for 6 months. He didn't know what to do, but he's going to pay for it because that's the way the legal system is set up. And so that's our challenge.
Hopefully.
Well, hopefully, well, we only have so much to burn. I hope so.
Starla, this goes into a very, challenging topic for me. Back in the day, we had Martin Luther King, really diving into peace and unity, ahimsa, nonviolence. And then we had Malcolm X, who was sharing about, hey, raising your force, your power, don't let people crap all over you, all of that energy. Where are we at now? Is it a blend? Do we need to have a blend of that might and softness? Like, what's your sense of, it seems like just the soft or loving and embracing nonviolent way seems to be maybe not as effectual. It seems the militant, we need to burn shit down. I don't know. So I just wanted to ask you what you're feeling in that.
So I believe in thinking holistically. I'm a very loving person, but I'm not gonna let you hurt me, because then I wouldn't be loving to myself. And so I think that's where we are. If we can move forward together in love, when the forces against love come, we will also be able to protect ourselves from those forces. And when I look at the civil rights movement is one of my favorite movements, but it's called the Civil Rights Nonviolent Movement. And it was way more violent than any other Black movement that has ever taken place in this country. The problem was the violence was coming from the white institutional representatives. It was coming from the police. It was coming from the governors who stood and blocked doors. It was coming from the firemen who put hoses on people. It was coming from free individual people who just showed up and burnt buses and beat up people and on and on and on. That happened. And yet we always call it a nonviolent movement. I'm confused. I didn't see the nonviolence in the civil rights movement. I didn't see the body counts in the civil rights movement being acknowledged. When the young white man, the young Jewish man, and the young Black man who were trying to get people to vote, which was a very revolutionary act, were found buried in the side of the dam, they don't talk about, as they were looking for them, they had to drag rivers. And in every river, they found Black bodies. And there's an amazing article called Other Bodies in the River, of all the young and old Black people they found dead in the water for who knows how long, while they were looking for just these three. And it was the young white woman whose husband was killed that said, if these white and Jewish men were not with this Black man, you never would have looked for them. You see, that consciousness is a consciousness that America does. Well, we care about all people, but that's not what we show. As horrendous as the killing of George Floyd was, because we saw it, the killing that still resonates in my being was the killing of the 12-year-old boy in the park playing with a gun, a toy gun. Our children can't play with toy guns, but other children can. That's called privilege, you see. Our children don't feel safe running through their community, but other children can, And with gentrification happening, there's all kinds of different people moving into the Black community, and you'll see them jogging and bicycling and walking their dogs in ways that you never saw the people in the community do those same things. But I think, because I really want to answer your question, we are the leaders. We are the leaders. We the people. You know, the Black Panthers always said power to the people. Well, we're the people they were talking about, all of us, all these ethnicities. And as we raise our consciousness, I believe we will lead us to a better place and a higher ground. And we will do it, hopefully, with love and peace and protection, because we all want to live.
Aho. These two I'm going to combine. How do we say we're sorry? And another person's asked, do you think it's possible after all these years to actually keep the momentum going into lasting change? Do you feel a shift, or is this it?
Well, I'm going to answer the last one first. Lasting change comes when people get the information that they need to make the choices and behave the way they want to behave, because now they have the facts. In other words, the fact is people of color are treated differently. There are two Americas, one for white people and one for people of color. And when we can see into each other's Americas, then our behavior will be more accurate in terms of how to deal with what we're living in. You know, most people of color are real clear there's two Americas. Most white people are not. Well, you have the same opportunities that I have. You can go to the same schools. I just had a document sent to me about Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. And Princeton is our oldest institution. And it was, it had a different name at the time. I'm blocking on it. And all these institutions had presidents who were slaveholders. All these institutions used slave bodies for sale to give scholarships to white children. We don't even know that part of our own education history. You know, I have a document called, what does the Ku Klux Klan, Adolf Hitler, the SAT, and the IQ test have in common? And what they have in common is all the creators of them were not only overtly racist, but called for the controlling of the population of people of color. It's like, what? They were eugenicists.
Well, wait a minute. It looks like we've lost her connection. Maybe she'll come back on again. Everyone's been asking very powerful questions, very valid questions. So thank you all for being on here so far. How many of you are getting a lot of value from this? Please let us know. Very good.
Love you, brother.
Please, I'd love you if you all could share perhaps something that you're getting personally out of this. A takeaway, a learning, an insight, a wisdom. And I'm going to let Suzanne have a chat with you all here while I call Starla, just to see how things are going on this little line here. So I'm going to have Suzanne continue to have a chat with you all. And all right, so I'll be right back.
I see. So I'd like to hear from someone. Just raise your hand, and I'm going to actually unmute you so you can speak.
You can unmute themselves.
Oh, you can unmute yourself, actually, Satyan's saying. So we'll go one at a time. I can hear you in there, Satya.
Okay, no worries. Should I?
Just give me a second.
Okay.
Okay, someone who wants to speak, just raise your hand. Ah, there, Jessica. Just unmute yourself, Jessica. Say something. Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
I'm sad that I hopped on late, but like even just coming on late, there's been so much just fantastic information and just a deeper awareness and just more languaging around all these different issues, you know, and how to, it's just you know, churning and how I can start to articulate things better when I'm, you know, speaking with others. And, you know, just, it feels better to be able to speak from a place with more knowledge when I'm talking about these issues, and just that deeper understanding is really important. And I totally agree with the education, right? It's the only way.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. You put yours on mute right now. Thank you. Someone else, just share a takeaway that you got from today. Something that you feel that you can apply in your life, in your world, So someone just raise your hand. What's a takeaway? Great, Nadia, I was looking at you. Just unmute yourself there.
Hey all, hey all. Yeah, a takeaway for me is, so I just right after the George Floyd incident formed a collective of writers called the Social Justice Writers. And we've been kind of reporting and trying to tell stories and help people create a dialogue on how they can talk about this, because that power of keep moving. And it's tricky, I think, in white culture to find the language, like Jessica was saying, you know, people are scared to say the wrong thing. They're scared of saying nothing. They're scared of, you know, like, they just don't know what to say, kind of thing. So my big takeaway from this has been a lot of the talk is really still in this divisive black, white, two lines. And my takeaway from this is this combination of it being like, we don't have to talk about it like it's division. We can just talk about it in a sense of it being a presence and a move on, you know, and not holding space in this tightness of not knowing, but being able to be like, I don't know, but I'm going to take the next step. You know, so for me, it's been nice, especially something in the work that we've been doing that I can relay back to. So. Oh, you're muted.
I was just going to say, thank you so much. And if you could put yours on mute right now, Natty, that was great. I see Erin Delaney in the house, and I know you've got something to say. What's a takeaway you've got for being here, Erin? Welcome. Hi.
I didn't see all of it. Looking forward to going back and listening to the beginning of her speaking. You know, I'm here tender, of course. A takeaway is just
Are you there?
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can so hear you. Yes, somebody else was just speaking, but go ahead.
Okay, where it says Ishe.
Oops. Is the place of how, like for me, I've been listening lately to a lot of younger voices.
Can you hear me?
I'm gonna keep going, right? Okay. I've been listening to a lot of younger voices of people of color speaking, black women, black men, but mostly women, and they've been really important. And I just had this soothing feeling of how it's important to listen, equally important, which not that this is a surprise, but it just, my heart is speaking. Speaking of, I can hear it through elder voices a little bit better because there's a gentleness and a kindness, but also a fierceness, both. So I've learned, you know, it's just amazing how many different stories, like the ones that she shared here about Princeton, and all of the ones I heard was like, shit, I mean, it's just endless, which of course is true. And I am just noticing that place of just hearing it from different voices is, and this is an unraveling, continual, obviously. I'm stating some obvious things, but it's just what's up for me right now of the in-breath and the out-breath of the fierce, strong, forceful voices, and then the gentle voices, and then how I need both, honestly. And it's just, the awakening comes from all different angles, and it feels especially good to be here in community together, to hear and to share and to see faces and know we're in this together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, I believe we have Starla. Are you back on, Starla, online?
Are you there?
Yes, wonderful. We
Okay.
don't have, we
Where
can't.
it says Ishe, that should be me.
Okay, we can't see you, but we'll do a completion now. By
Can
the
you
way, everyone has everyone received a lot of just incredible like insight, knowledge, and deepening today. Starla, I just want to thank you. It's been just so rich to have your life experience, your wisdom, your power, your clarity, and your love that penetrates through everything. And I just, although we can't see you now, I just want, oh, there, yes,
There
okay.
you are.
I just want to honor you for your lifelong dedication. And I would love to have you back here again if you're open to share more. I think this is the topic, and cultivation, as warrior sages, I truly believe, as you shared, education is, we need to be educated, and we need to educate ourselves on all these things that you've shared about. And also we need to apply it. We need to be courageous enough, not just to think about these things and worry about them, but to be a stand for integrity, be a stand for the next stage of evolution for our society. And you've given so much richness around that. Please, what shares do you have for us?
I would like to say too, I'd love
Yeah,
to
please.
honor Starla for being here. And the one of the beauties that you have, one of the gifts that I love about you is that in your space there is room for error. That you can forget, you can forget your awareness in your space and still be held. I feel like from learning what I've learned here with you today, there are some things that went off for me that I didn't get. I had the white privilege thing going on. Those words just were grating against me when I would hear those words. But when you spoke about it, not the way that you did, it's that information, and it's okay for me to make a mistake. And you just hold this embrace that is such with such grace and such depth of knowledge and an embodiment of where you come from and what it is you speak. So it is that depth, that beauty, that love that just radiates from you in every pore of your being. I'm just so grateful that you took the time to spend with us today and give us who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe in a lot of my history and my culture. And one of the things I believe is that I am because we are. And we are, therefore I am. I believe we come into consciousness of ourselves through our interactions with others. In my classroom, I only have one rule, and that is respect yourself. Because I find that when people respect themselves, you're automatically respected. And we have to learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. Mm-hmm. My job isn't to convince you of anything. It's to share what I know around you. And as Aunt Kate would say, take what you can use and the rest just throw away. Because you see, how can we make things better? We model better. And we model better when we know better. And that's why I'm such a proponent of education, but not schooling. When I say education, I'm not talking about degrees, because we have been miseducated. And my mother used to always say, there is no fool like an educated fool, because they think they know stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it's important that we allow ourselves to be open to learning, open to making mistakes, and open to self-correction. It's not about, I made a mistake. We've all done that, and we will, I'm sure, do many more. But we need to be able to self-correct. And what helps us self-correct is that education, having more consciousness and information. I believe in human beings. I believe in humanity. I believe in the human spirit. And I believe that when we connect the head and the heart, we make much better decisions. And I think what we've seen in the world is people are connecting their head and heart because they were so appalled. And when we see something that is appalling, rather than just focus on that thing, what lesson is me bearing witness to this going to teach me? And how is it going to bring the best out of me? And that's my goal, that people start bringing their best out. because you have to have courage to do that, because you're going to get pushback. You're going to get people who disagree. You're going to, and this is important because I kind of heard the last comment, which is so very important. We have to toughen our skin so that when someone is in pain, screaming out their pain, we don't ask them, but could you calm that down? Could you say it nicer? Could you not have such venom attached to it? Because literally what we saw was all those different behaviors. We saw the loving hugging, and we saw people screaming and hollering, and we saw people breaking down and holding it in. We saw all that. And that's a representative of who we are. You know, I've screamed. You know, I'm very calm at this moment, but I screamed, I cried, I wailed, because I'm a mother. So I saw someone's son killed, you know? But we have to be able to say, okay, I bear witness. And we have to respect those people who say, I can't look at that. Because at the same time, we don't know their sensibilities. And I know for me, I have a daughter, she says, I haven't seen it, I'm not looking at it, because I will never forget it. Well, I'll never forget it either, but my sensibilities have been worked on to be able to handle more stuff because I've chosen to teach this stuff.
Starla, thank you so much. Everyone, let's just give Starla a big hug. Our deepest honoring, beautiful elder, wisdom keeper, holder of what's right and true and virtuous. Thank you so much for showing us the way through your example of how to move forward with all of our divisions and come back to unity.
Thank you. Thank you. And please teach the children the truth. We can stop it there if we just teach the children the truth. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Starla.
Thank you, community. Thank you all for your love, your share, for showing up, for coming together. This will be recorded, and then we'll be sending it to our Warrior Sage email list. Please feel free to share it. We'll also post it on our YouTube page. And I think however many people can listen to this and allow it to touch their hearts, we're going to continue to move forward. We're going to continue to align. We're going to continue, all of us, to arise together to create the reality that we wish, together as one. Bless.
Thank you, family. Thank you.
Much love, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.